Howdy, Scott Newman, Associate Editor of Motor Magazine here, and I've just finished road testing the McLaren 570S. So I thought I'd do a quick video walk around of the car to show you some of its features and tell you a few thoughts about what we've discovered today. So the McLaren 570S is the sort of sportiest version of the McLaren Sports Series range. It's got 3.8 litre twin turbo V8, like all McLarens, here producing 419 kilowatts and 600 Newton meters. Now this might be sort of the baby car in McLaren's range, but it's still plenty fast. It does 0 to 100 in 3.2 seconds, well at least that's the claim. 0 to 200 kilometers an hour in 9.5 seconds, which is pretty damn impressive. Weighs 1,440 kilograms. The styling's interesting. It certainly stands out, especially in this colour. Is it beautiful? Don't know. You can make your own mind up on that, but it's certainly got plenty of presence. If you want to turn heads, a bright green McLaren is a good way to do so. We'll go down here. We'll check out the rolling stock. So 20-inch rims with massive carbon ceramic brakes behind them. What's interesting is that the rear tyres are Ferraris P0 Corsas on this, which are pretty focused. Rear tyres are 285 wide, but the front tyres are only 225 millimeters wide. That's something you'd find on a hot hatch rather than a supercar. McLaren tried to under-tyre this car a little bit deliberately to make it a bit more fun, a bit more engaging, and make the limits easier to access. It works to a point, but there is quite a bit of understeer in this car at the limits. Pardon me. So it would be interesting to drive the car with maybe 235 or 245 front rubber on it, but don't get me wrong, this thing still has crazy amounts of grip by any normal standard. I mentioned the power figures and the claimed acceleration, but what you can probably get an idea from the claims, but this car is so fast. It's like my neck actually hurts from driving it all day today because it is so physical. The acceleration is just immense. You could drive it on 75% throttle and still be, amazed by its acceleration. But when the turbos really spool up and you get going, it is just staggeringly fast. All these baby supercars, let alone the real things like the 488 and the 720S, but all these baby supercars now are just so fast that getting anywhere near there, getting to full throttle on the public road is a real challenge, a real event, because the speed isn't intimidating, but it's so much that I can't imagine you'd ever really get used to it. We're talking a car here that probably does like a high 10-second quarter, maybe very low 11. So yeah, we're talking serious speed here. Now, what would a supercar be without some snazzy doors? Pretty flush. The release is actually quite tricky, but it's right there. So it can take a bit of finding, but you get used to it. Now, the interior, just hop in. Slide this back to give you a better view. Now, it's quite, plain's probably the wrong word. That's a bit harsh, but it is quite undramatic in here. Now, it would only take some, a few flashes of carbon or some contrasting stitching to liven things up a bit, which you can easily get from McLaren's extensive options list. But it's a very purposeful environment in here. Obviously, you can see the wheel in front of me. It doesn't have a single button on it. The rim is actually really thin, a lot thinner than most cars, but that's a real bonus. It fits beautifully in your hand, and yeah, there's something nice about having an uncluttered driving environment. As you can see, digital dash in front of us. We'll just foot on the brake, press the start button, hold it down, and that comes to life. Now, the biggest thing in tweaking the McLaren are these little dials down here. We've got H for chassis and P for powertrain. So each of them has 3 settings. We've got normal, sport and track. What's slightly unusual though is you can tweak them to your heart's content, but it doesn't work, doesn't do anything until you press this active button. You see they light up and you get a change in screen there. I'll just do that again, see, da-da. And there you go, which is pretty cool. And these obviously light up as you go along and provide you with a shift light. And there's different screens as well. It's track, and that's sport, and that's normal. Not much difference between normal and sport, but then yeah, if you go to track, you get this fancy, race car style dash. ESC has 3 modes. What's kind of cool is you press that to put it in dynamic mode. How's this for attention to detail? The ESP sign is actually a mini McLaren rather than just being a generic car, which is quite cool. Speaking of funny little touches, if you push the this is the iris system, controls all the infotainment and the heating and ventilation controls, but the little man in the ventilation has the helmet on. So there you go, McLaren's racing heritage coming to the fore. Pretty standard gearbox, D for drive, N for neutral, R for reverse. Paddle shift selects first. I'll put that back in neutral just in case. And the paddles are on a rocker switch, so you can't pull them both at the same time. Not that you'd ever really need to, but in a GT3 for instance, you pull both paddles at the same time and you're to engage neutral, but this is actually on a rocker, so it works one paddle at a time. What else to say? You can get the menu, there's a little thing down here, so there's a toggle here. Don't know if you can see that, it's a bit dark, so for the cruise control, but there's one over here that selects this menu, and you flick through like that. This selects the nose lift. It's a bit of a faff having to do the nose lift via this menu every time you want to do it, but it's not the end of the world. What else have we got? One thing with the ESC is kind of weird. It's one of these weird little quirks this McLaren seems to have. Just like no matter what you do with these switches, you can't do anything unless you press the active button. You can only put it in ESC dynamic mode if you've got the handling in sport or track. Now that might seem quite sensible in one respect, but having driven this car today, it's very stiff. So on some poor roads, sometimes you want a little extra compliance, but if you want the slip from the more sporting ESP setting, tough luck. You have to put up with either the stiff suspension to have the extra slip, or the more compliant suspension and just let the ESP take over, which it certainly isn't afraid to do when you've got this much power, because it will easily light up the rear wheels if you're too eager with the throttle, especially when the turbos come on. Obviously we've got, launch control down here, auto stop start, deactivate. Iris system works pretty well. This is the home button, McLaren symbol, so you've got obviously nav. It's not the flashiest or the greatest resolution. The graphics are quite plain, but it's a reasonably intuitive system. We've got ventilation, settings, and home button. Media, entertainment, all that sort of thing. Reasonably practical. You've got a little shelf back here. Don't know if you can see that, but there's also not a whole lot of luggage space in the cabin. Now, it might not be the sexiest feature of a supercar, but if you actually ever want to drive it anywhere, having somewhere to put your bags is quite handy. So, perhaps unsurprisingly for some people, the luggage space in a McLaren is actually pretty good. Similar to a 911 Turbo or a Huracan, you can actually fit a reasonable amount of gear in one of these. Photography gear, which we've been transporting today, or luggage for a weekend away, which is quite handy. Close that. One weird quirk of the McLaren is it's got no engine cover. It has an engine cover, but you can't remove it. You need to be a technician to remove it. Apparently only takes a few seconds, but there's no latch, there's no clasp, there's no nothing. You can understand their point. They want to prevent owners fiddling with what is an extremely expensive bit of gear. But you will see here, this is an access panel that flips up, and you can check your oil and water. But yeah, no access to the engine, which is a bit strange. Apart from that, not a lot else to say. It's a very, very impressive bit of kit. Is it the best supercar in its class? Tricky. 911 Turbo might be a little bit more composed, but it doesn't have the theatre of this thing. Obviously, the looks of this car and the noise it makes turns plenty of heads. Then again, the Lamborghini Huracan LP582 is arguably even more extrovert. But if you want a car maybe with kind of the competence and the ability of the Porsche, but with a bit of the Lambo's flash factor, this is a pretty good compromise. Like, don't get me wrong, it is incredibly quick, incredibly able. There's a few little niggles on it doesn't like bumpy road, it tends to skip around a little bit, and the steering doesn't provide the feedback you might want, especially when you're going as quickly as this car is capable of. But we'll have a full review up online soon on motormag.com.au and in a future issue of the magazine. So tell us what you think about the McLaren 570S in the comments below.